I don't have that.
We are live.
We're live, Senate Appropriations. We're talking about an amendment being proposed by Senator Beck 493 the budget. Here are, can you print one more so then Senator Beck can have copies? One of the, it's the same thing. One of them two-sided, one of them stapled.
Okay. Make sure it's 3.1. Okay. Okay. So there are, I guess you have it divided out, 4 instances of amendment here. The first amendment is the first two. The first is the repeal of the clean heat standard. The second is the repeal of the standard clean standard tax data sharing as part of the fuel dealer registry. The third is a fuel tax report. That would be, right now all this data is available as I understand it, but you have to request it. This would make it so that they have to publish the report. And the fourth would repeal the private right of action in the Global Warming Solutions Act. I'm told by Ledge Counsel that that would not impact the current cases that have been filed. And I also understand that it doesn't, I guess there is, I don't remember the statute or but even before the Global Warming Solutions Act, there is a mechanism where somebody can sue the state if they're not doing what they said they were going to do. So it doesn't touch on that. And I guess that predated Global Warming Solutions Act by a long time. So, did I miss anything, Ellen? Okay. Yeah.
You ready for questions?
Yes.
Say more. So the fuel tax report, have you talked to the commissioner of taxes or tax department? Like, are they, this is information they already have, so they're not saying it's going to cost them any money to produce this report?
I don't believe so. We took testimony on this over in Natural Resources and Energy. It was part of S65, I believe, wasn't it? Yeah, Senator Watson. So no. It's a report that's already there. They just would make it available to.
They would like put it on their website, because it doesn't say who they have to give the report to. They would just kind of
just make it available to the public, just like any other report that's generally available on the website.
Okay. And my other main question is, why do you want to put this on the budget?
Well, in the budget, we do pay for positions over at the PUC, even though we haven't adopted the clean heat standard, and we're spending monies over at the Attorney General's office to deal with at least one lawsuit that we've received so far. So I thought that would be the appropriate place to put it.
So the repeal there were several positions created in the Clean Heat Standard Act that would eliminate those positions of repealing the whole chapter, or is this just the chapter Clean Heat Standard section?
The section, the chapter 94.
And in that chapter, those positions were created, or?
I don't know if they were created in 94 or if they were created in something else to satisfy that chapter. Maybe Ellen knows.
Ellen Garcia, Legislative Council. The positions were not created as part of the statute. They were the session law provisions, but those positions would still exist. I do believe the PUC specified that at least one of those currently vacant already. And I don't think that they asked for additional funding for those positions in the current budget.
Because if the Clean Heat Standard wasn't happening, supposedly we would need those positions.
But the repeal does not eliminate the state employee position.
Right.
Okay. Any other questions for Senator Beck?
Since we're incorporating some aspect of S65 in here, one of the things that we talked about was the fuel dealer registry, and that so by repealing this eliminates that fuel dealer registry.
I believe that's true.
So there was some modifications that S65 made to the fuel dealer registry so that it would continue to exist. Any thoughts on on that.
Yeah, I think just my take is we just need a clean break from this. People are already registered as business owners. They report their taxes, the fuel tax remission on a remittance on a, we already know who they all are. Okay.
Any other questions?
Well, I might, without the registry, because the tax data we have, from this,
Right.
we would have it, broken up by type, but we wouldn't know who they are. Like that would not, like, we might be able to look up a business that we think would have that information, but the state is not gonna disclose,
The tax department would not disclose this data
right,
on a business basis.
right, like who is,
No,
paying that.
we will know, which is what we already know. We will know, how many gallons of number 2 were sold, how many gallons of propane, natural gas, but not, the tax department has that data, but I don't think this should. But that-
and so one other question for you, should this language not pass?
Yeah.
Should the status quo exist? Would the clean heat standard as a program moving forward?
I guess that's the open question, depending on whether any legislature at any time decided to,
Well, with any legislation that exists, that's proposed in the Senate right now, to your knowledge?
no,
Right, okay.
no. I mean, the possibility exists. It's an open-ended question. We've never, the check back vote or whatever hour that is legally defined. We've never done that. So, at any point, somebody could, decide to take that check back vote.
But there's a current plan, there's no bill to move that
Not that
forward.
I'm aware.
And so at status quo right now, it's not happening.
That check back vote is still out there somewhere in the future. Whether somebody will make a move on it, I don't know.
Do you think this changes the process if somebody wanted to put the clean heat standard into effect, whether the check back vote or the standard was repealed changes the process to put it into effect?
Well, I think if you do this, I don't think there is I think check back vote possibilities are limited.
Right, but if somebody wanted to put the clean heat standard into effect, does it matter whether this is repealed or not, as far as the process they go?
I think if this was repealed, it would be a lot more difficult. They'd have to go through the whole process again of putting it in the statute.
Don't we have to do that anyway?
Right, we'd have to do that anyway, man. We'd have to propose what the standard would be
Right.
and then vote on, have a bill. And that bill would have to go through the whole.
Yeah, I mean, there has to be a vehicle to make that happen. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions for either Senator Beck or Ledge Council on this amendment? It's pretty short and sweet.
Ellen did a good job keeping that.
If that's helpful.
Okay?
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Yeah,
All right.
so we should probably take a straw vote on this amendment, whether we find it favorable to the budget. I see his point that there are some potential connections to expenditures, but I'm having some difficulty seeing the connection to the budget.
I agree. I think if it were going to be done, it should be done with a bill that moves through the relevant committees.
Agreed.
I'm a little confused here.
Okay, sure.
There was a bill, it's non-existent right now, and now we got a motion or an amendment to repeal the bill. So is the bill a moot issue right now?
There's the bill, there was that 65
There was
that
a study.
at one point included
Yeah.
repealing.
Yeah.
So the first instance of amendment would have been part of that at 65.
But it never came back for the check back, is what I'm saying, is what I'm
You're
asking.
talking about the
You
clean
can-
The
heat.
clean heat standard
Oh.
never came, because the check back was have the board study it, come up with a plan, and then the legislature could have taken that and developed into a bill and gone through the process, committee process, to the floor, to the House, to the governor. But that, no senator decided to move forward with that, or House member. So it's, yeah, nobody ever presented a program.
Oh, we didn't think it was the right program for us at this time. We actually had a report from the Public Utility Commission saying that it wasn't a great fit for Vermont, given the conditions that we have right now. There may be other conditions sometime in the future in which it is a better fit for us. And so, that it's a possibility for some future time. For example, if there were other states that were participating in a program like this, so that we didn't have to build the infrastructure for it from scratch. So that was one example. But so given that, there was no intention to move forward with that discussion.
It'd been helpful, I guess, if I'd had some discussion, we had some discussion on this. We're not yawning bonus of now so we're talking about.
We had discussion on whether, the way I look at it is the check back worked. For people who were wanting to add the check back, their reasoning was, what if it turns out to be not a good fit for us, or too expensive, or X, Y, or Z? We got the report back. I think the general decision among my party was that we weren't going to pursue that at this point because of the check back. So are you saying you would have liked to have been consulted on whether we should go?
I don't need to be consulted. I just thought we'd had a discussion on the floor about the check back, is all I'm saying.
We did.
We did?
Well, we had the discussion of the repeal. There was the one vote we had to bring the repeal bill to the floor. So that was sort of the discussion. And then S65 would have repealed it, similar to this first instance of amendment, together with some changes to the fuel dealer registry. So we had some discussion on that, but then it got pulled back from the committee.
And I guess what I mean is, we had the discussion about whether to have a check back before you were here. And that discussion resulted in putting the check back into the clean heat standard. And so, in that way, I think the people who pushed for that, and there were 5 of them, I think they were successful in terms of getting what they wanted, which was not to have it go into effect automatically. We'd take a look at it, which we did, and then decided not to go forward with a new bill.
And I think it's important to note that we talked about a check back vote, but it wasn't just a general check back. Like, the legislature wants to see the details before we move forward. We got some details and recommendations from the PUC, which was like, this is probably a very expensive program for Vermont to run, not just administratively difficult, complicated. Something just like a tax on heating fuel would be a lot simpler, a lot cheaper to run if that's what the legislature wants to do. But based on that, nobody said, okay, let's move forward on that. So that, I agree with Pro Tem's kind of description of it. The check back worked in that. We checked back and nobody raised their hand to say, let's keep moving forward.
Which the point of my questioning there was just to try to make clear that the lack of discussion that we've had about moving forward with it means that we're not doing it. The default is that it doesn't happen.
Right.
So
we don't
it's gone.
do it.
It's scrapped.
Right, as of right now, yeah.
What do you mean as of right now? Is it gone? Is it scrapped? Does that bill still exist someplace?
Somebody could introduce a bill.
A new bill?
It could be a new bill that says, we're gonna move
The old bill's
forward,
dead.
right?
Yeah.
Somebody could introduce a new bill, it has to go through the whole process.
Right.
They could introduce what the PUC recommended on the fee, the flat fee to increase, revenue from fuel. It's, I think it was a ½ cent per gallon, so it was like a fee more than the tax, so, I mean, that could still happen, but it has to be a bill going all the way
Or
through.
somebody could do an amendment on
Yeah.
the budget tomorrow that says that we shall do the clean standard. But it's the same as any other effort on anything else. I mean, my view, I know some people campaign hard on repealing the clean standard and they want to follow through on that. And so it's kind of virtual signaling a little bit. It's like, okay, we repealed it, but the actual impact of whether it can go forward or not does not matter whether you repeal it or not, because you still have to move it all through the legislative process, and through past the governor. I think people know the governor's not gonna support it, so why spend the time on it?
So, if you're confused, I'm at this point a little more confused than you are, I think. We're looking at an amendment to repeal the clean heat standard, which you're telling me doesn't exist.
That's right.
Right, yeah, it's not happening.
Yeah.
Like if you're,
There is not a
So-
standard. We asked the PUC to study a standard, and the cost of administrating it, the form it would take, how administratively it would work, and then also gives an estimate of what they think that would do on the price of fossil fuel going forward. And that's what they presented to us, like, here's how you would do a clean heat standard. On the side, they said, we don't think you should do it. If you wanted to do something like this, do the fee instead. So they gave that to us, and we took it and said, oh, that's a good point, and we set it aside.
Okay.
That's where it is today.
So, from my point of view, there's two ways to look at that. There's one that says we don't need this because it doesn't exist. And the other point of view over here is telling me, why not repeal it if it doesn't exist?
Yeah.
Well, and S65,
yeah, so S65 did incorporate a repeal of that language, in part because it's kind of moot whether the language exists or not. But there is a part of Chapter 94 that includes fuel dealer registry, and those details are valuable, as I was alluding to in my question there about knowing who the parties are that are involved in selling fuel. So S65 had, I would call it a more nuanced approach to saying, sure, we're not doing the clean heat standard. Let's remove the language, but we're going to keep this part about the fuel dealer registry and tweak it so that it's more effective for us, because it needed some updating anyway. So that's how that S65 dealt with the clean heat repeal. It wasn't, it repealed the chapter, but put back in the useful language, of which, to Senator Beck's credit, the fuel tax report was a part of that. So I'm grateful for that, but it's, there was more to it than that. There were actually a couple other parts, based on that ended up in 65.
So, Norm?
So we're using a portion of S65, which does not exist today, correct?
I mean, it's on my wall.
But we pulled a portion of that out of the bill, and we're using that. So in essence, there's still a portion that exists on S65.
No.
That 65 was not the clean heat standard.
What was it?
It's the repeal.
That was a repeal. It was a repeal together with
that was,
increased funding for Efficiency Vermont.
But the bill that we haven't seen is still being used for the.
no, that's a different bill.
That's a different bill. That's the
We
bill
need
that
a few more
doesn't
bills here.
The bill that this language from was the S65, which was about Efficiency Vermont.
Yeah.
And having them do weatherization work. Was not related to the clean heat standard at all.
And that bill, S65, was very close to having enough bipartisan support to make it to the Senate floor and perhaps out, but came up just a bit short at the end. We moved it back to committee. So, I also think it's great that Scott put a piece of it in here, but S65 imagined I would say, a more effective compromise between the Democratic Party's position on it and the Republican Party's position on it. But that compromise didn't secure quite enough support to make it all the way.
Well, I guess I would end by saying, I would support a straw poll, which is probably going to be defeated here in committee. This is probably one of the best conversations I've had so far in reference to the clean heat standard. I'd like to continue that conversation on the floor if nobody minds.
Oh, we will.
And I think I can see to Brendan's point is like, well, you're not doing it, you shouldn't care if you repeal it or you don't need to repeal it, you don't vote for it. So I think either way you vote on that, it's fine. The main reason I'm not voting for it is I just don't think it should be done in the budget. I don't think there's not enough of a connection I mean, I wouldn't vote for it anyway if it was somewhere else.
Come on.
I'm being honest about
I
that.
wouldn't have guessed that.
Yeah,
Well, I'll be honest
But-
about that, but it also, it's just not the process to put it in the budget. And I don't, you know, I don't think there's enough of a connection, but I understand why he's doing it, and I don't fault him for that. But, I mean, other than the third instance of amendment, which I'm fine with, but that's what the field tax report.
But it is germane to the budget. It's just not, and I kind of agree with you, but, it's germane.
Well, we don't know that.
We don't know for sure yet.
Yeah.
No,
And
we don't
maybe-
know that.
I would
until-
assume he would have asked.
who makes that decision, Bob? The
Maybe
secretary?
not.
I think the
Lieutenant governor makes
positions
it
he was
advised by the secretary.
Yeah,
Or who's ever presiding. Not
okay,
always.
well, that's beside the point anyway,
Well, and I'm glad that this conversation has been helpful, because I do think that there has been a lot of confusion and misinformation about what the clean heat standard did not do. So in as much as it's useful to help clarify that, happy to do that. It's also, the report turned out to be just, we're talking about much cheaper than some of the projections that were out there. That
As far
were
as the price on.
the price of fuel, right? It was turned out to be much more modest, which is
The administrative cost and burden was significant.
right. Yeah,
But it was
it wasn't.
a market-based system that we kind of have to wait till it gets going and have the market react to it to see it actually. But then we decided, based on the report, that we're not gonna, at least now, nobody's proposing to try to make that work. But you're free to introduce it till next year. Okay, so
I'm
I'm,
happy to get through the first floor report from appropriations.
Well done.
yeah, well, okay, so on this amendment, this is a straw poll on who would support this amendment.
Who supported?
Supporting it. Okay, 3 votes in support, so against this vote? Against this amendment, okay. So the committee, I will report that the committee voted 4-3 to not support this amendment to the bill. Make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
I do just want to congratulate the whole committee on getting through our first floor report, because we're going back to a system where everybody's reporting their sections. I thought that worked really well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I thought it was good. Definitely takes longer than Senator Kitchell just giving us a 15-minute overview, but I think it helps everybody understand what's
Yeah.
happening, and it helps the committee members to know all the different things that happen in their state government.
And I took the extra step.
Of stealing.
I stole one of yours.
Right.
I looked at he took a couple things of mine, and I just crossed them off and said, good, keep going.